Hello out there. This week we are debunking homeschooling myths that are floating around out there. I know I believed some of them myself before I started 15 years ago, to homeschool, that is. When I was a kid, I loved school. I went to public schools in New York and in Florida, and I loved it. I loved my teachers, I loved my classes, I loved the activities that school had to offer. I did not, nor do I now, have anything against school. So the myth that homeschoolers must hate public school is just that. It's a myth. My kids actually started out in school. They were there a couple of years before we chose to educate them at home. And it was not, I didn't choose to educate them at home because I hated the school that they were in. In fact, I loved the teachers. I loved what they were learning. But what I really pulled them out for was because I really missed them. I missed being with my kids. When I dropped my kids off at school in the morning, they were happy. At the end of the day, while I was really excited to go see my kids, to pick them up and have a great afternoon with them, they were so worn out. They were actually grumpy. And that kind of wore on me a little bit, so I started thinking about homeschooling. I love being with my kids. My kids are very inquisitive in general. They love doing anything, and I enjoyed taking them places, having picnics in the backyard with them, going for walks with them in the park. I loved cooking with them in the kitchen, going to the library and the museum, and I loved reading stories with them. So the fact that when I brought them to school, they were happy. Bringing them home from school, they were grumpy. Like I said, that started to wear on me as a parent, and I just decided that I'd like to be with them while they're learning and they're smiling and happy. So maybe you could say it was a little bit selfish of me, but what it wasn't was that I hated the school. I never hated the school. So that brings me to another myth that people have, is that you need to have patience in order to homeschool. And a lot of people say to me, oh, I could never homeschool because I'm not patient. Well, let me tell you, 15 years ago, I was a lot more impatient than I am now. Patience is something that you have to learn, and the only way to learn how to be patient is to have your patience tried again and again every day. But it's very important that we as parents are patient with our kids and that we are patient with other people. So to use the excuse that, well, I'm not a patient person with my kids is really not a valid argument, because the goal is to get better, right? We want to always be getting better. So it's okay to be impatient, but you just have to keep working at being patient. So don't let your impatience stop you. Recognize that as a character flaw and start working towards being patient, because being patient with your kids is only going to help you be patient with other people, and we all know that that's a very good thing to be, is patient with people. Going into homeschooling, knowing that about yourself is great. You're not perfect, and I want to tell you that your homeschooling does not need to be perfect either. There's no one method of homeschooling out there that's the perfect way to homeschool. You need to have the focus that the goal is to make sure that your kid becomes a well-rounded, well-educated, virtuous person who's going to better humanity. That's your goal with educating your child at home. So there's not going to be just one perfect way to homeschool. You have to pay attention to your child, to your children, and what works for them. Now, you might end up buying a box curriculum, for example, thinking that this is going to be the end-all be-all for you, and then within a few months decide you're just going to get rid of that box curriculum because it's not working out for you guys. You're more tense and you don't want to have all this anxiety in the house. Learning doesn't need to be so. I hope as an adult you've done some learning on your own as well, in a variety of different ways, whether it's with a job or with your faith or with fitness, and you realize that there's lots of ways to learn, and some ways work better for you than others. It's the same way now with your kids. So there's no one perfect way to homeschool. When we first started out, I don't think I got a box curriculum, but I had everything structured in my home. I had a space for it. It was going to be in the basement. I had a schedule that I was going to keep my little boys on, and I knew exactly what I was going to do, and that went out the window within a couple of weeks. It was just entirely too stressful. So I went the opposite direction, and I what they call unschooling, and that's child-led learning. And while for some families that works beautifully, for my family it did not work beautifully, not for them and not for my personality. So we ended up kind of going in the middle, where I just made sure my kids know their math facts, they knew how to read, I was teaching them how to read, how to hold the pen or pencil for penmanship, how to write. And then we just did a lot of fun things like reading books from the library, going to science museums, going to historical museums, going on field trips, and that all together flowed perfectly for our family. It may not for your family. It doesn't matter what's right for my family. It matters only what was right for your family. So be aware that there's no one perfect way of homeschooling. Okay. The other thing is, as my kids got older, I knew there were some subjects that I did not want to teach, nor could I teach. So don't think that you have to be able to teach everything, because that's, again, another myth. There are so many resources out there, even more resources out there than when I was started homeschooling 15 years ago. So what I did for me was we went to and found a homeschool tutorial. In a homeschool tutorial, it's kind of like a hybrid. We met for 2 days a week, and the other 3 days a week, my kids were home doing their work. So 2 days a week, it was kind of like a school setting. It was like 25 parents got together, and the parents swapped teaching different things. So what I was good at, I taught. What someone else was good at, they taught, and our kids all got all the subjects, and it worked out beautifully. That may not be something you want to do, and that's great. You can totally find teachers online that can teach your kid. Like, say you don't want to teach English, high school English. You can find all sorts of resources online that can teach high school English. Maybe you don't want to teach math. Tons of resources out there with math. You can do whatever you want. There's probably plenty of resources in your community. One of our homeschooling co-ops has worked with a gentleman who is excellent at teaching history, and he has done that in our homeschool community for years now. There's all sorts of resources out there. So don't think for 1 second, don't believe that myth that you have to be able to teach everything, because you don't. And there's so many resources out there that you can find them if you just are resourceful yourself to go out and find what your child can learn, but not from you. Okay, finally, a myth that I had to overcome, which actually involved non-homeschoolers. It was a myth that I believed, and I discovered how wrong my belief was. I believed that I could not take my kids out into the community during school hours because someone would turn me in for truancy. I was afraid, but my fears were unwarranted. Every time I took my kids out, usually it was to the grocery store or to Walmart or something like that, we'd be in line and people would say, "Oh, are schools out today?" Or, "Oh, is your child sick? Is that why they're not in school?" And I would say, "No, we actually homeschool, and we're done for the day," which we were. We're done for the day. Not that they needed to know that we were done for the day, but, we homeschooled, and they're all done with their work, and people normally responded with, "Oh, I'd love to be able to do that for my kids," or, "Oh, my kids' school is so great, I'm glad they're in it." And it was all very positive. There was nothing negative. No one was mean-spirited about having, my kids being in homeschool. So experiencing that for myself, that debunked the myth that I believed. I hope that this video has been good for you, that you've learned something, that the myths out there are just that, myths. We don't need to worry about them at all. If you're deciding to homeschool this year, hope that this video is good to help you navigate homeschooling. But If you want to learn more about homeschooling, you can subscribe to this channel. There are links in the description to our website, Eagle Mom Squad. We have a Facebook page. The links are there as well in the bottom, and as well as our podcast. Thanks for watching.